All right. Looks like our waiting room has emptied and everyone's in now. Welcome. Good evening. My name is Dana Nicholas. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Free from Violence Project Officer at Knox City Council. I have light brown hair, brown eyes, and I'm wearing a black top and a black blazer this evening. I would like to start tonight's webinar by acknowledging the lands on which we meet. For us hosting here in Knox, as well as our neighbouring partners in Maroondah and Monash councils, we are coming to you from Wurundjeri Woiwurrung land. Knox also sits on the land of the Boonwurrung people, and so I'd like to pay respects to Wurundjeri and Boonwurrung elders, past and present. Also noting that, of course, we're meeting virtually tonight, and so the lands on which we are all joining on may stretch far and wide. So I would like to acknowledge and pay respects to the elders and traditional custodians of the lands we are all joining from this evening. It always was and always will be Aboriginal land. I'd also like to acknowledge the impact that family violence has had on families and communities and pay respect to the strength and resilience of those who have and are still experiencing and living with violence. We thank those who have publicly shared their stories and those who continue to advocate to shape Victoria's response. We pay respects to those who did not survive and to their family members and friends. Thank you again for joining us tonight for Know Your Rights, Navigating Family Violence Supports. This webinar has been developed in recognition of Are You Safe at Home Day, which was technically held last Saturday on the 10th of May. The webinar is being delivered in partnership, as I mentioned earlier, with Maroondah, Monash and Knox City Council, along with support from the Victorian Government. So some housekeeping to start off with. I did want to let you know that this event is being recorded. However, only the panelists will be visible during the webinar and on the recording. The webinar is recommended for those aged 18 and over, and we do encourage, like I said earlier, the use of headphones tonight if possible. We will be sending the recording out following the webinar, so please note that correspondence will be reaching your inbox in the coming days. And if you do take something from tonight's session, something you think is valuable or useful, we encourage you to share the recording with a friend or a loved one should they need it. Or also a reminder through Zoom, you can turn on closed captions through the options in the taskbar down the bottom if that's helpful. And look, I also want to acknowledge that this is a deeply personal and challenging topic for many people to discuss or to hear. So if you do require support, please check the resources that have been posted in the chat. These will be emailed to you, all registered participants as well after the event. A reminder here as well to practice self-care. If you do need to step away at any time, the quickest way to exit the webinar is by clicking little X at the top somewhere, which is the quick exit, or you can click the leave button, usually at the bottom right of the screen. This will prompt you again and ask something like, do you really want to leave? But either way, once you do exit, you'll be taken to a general Zoom page with no mention of the webinar that you've attended. Look, as I mentioned, it will be recorded, so if you do need to leave and jump off, you could always pick it up at another time. Look, I also wanted to note before I do hand over to our moderator that our incredibly skilled panel of speakers, they come from a variety of local organisations that are doing great work in supporting people who are experiencing family violence. But the discussions tonight and the information provided will be broad, not client specific. It's information, not advice. We do encourage anyone who needs specific advice, please reach out to these organisations or to the Orange Door or to any other of the other services that we post in the chat throughout the night. To that note, I did want to also mention we've received a number of questions already that we'll be putting to our panelists. However, if you have asked a question during registration that included details specific to a case, these won't formally be addressed tonight for that reason. I do encourage, again, please reach out to any of these organisations to get that personalised support that you need. We also have a Q&A function located on the bottom taskbar as well. We encourage you to ask questions that we'll aim to put to our panelists if time permits. But remember, again, anything case specific can't be addressed. I'll also note it's important to be mindful of sharing personal survivor stories. Anything that can identify someone or a situation won't be put forward for safety reasons. Look, that's the housekeeping done. I'm pleased to introduce our moderator tonight, Jane Gilmore. Jane is an author, a feminist, and an ex journalist. She's been researching and writing, hi Jane,
Right.
about the causes and effects of violence and poverty for almost 2 decades and is now undertaking a PhD at Monash University. She's researching perpetrators of sexual violence and what they think about masculinity and shame, and whether this knowledge could be used to make prevention education more effective. Really important work, Jane. In 2015, Jane started the Fixed It campaign, pushing for change in the way media reports on men's violence against women, and has published numerous books, including Teaching Consent, which was published in 2022. Her latest book, Fairy Tale Princesses Will Kill You Children, was published in 2023. Jane will be guiding tonight's conversation with our panelists, and I'm thrilled to hand over to you now, Jane.
Thank you so much, Dana. I'm so delighted to be here. This is one of the events that really does change the world because it's working at that community level, and that's where I know that real change happens. So I'm really thrilled to be here. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. I'm on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, but I know that I'm coming to people all over Australia and from all kinds of different traditional owners. We all know that we are in many ways the beneficiaries of atrocity, and it's something that we can never forget. We don't have to necessarily carry guilt, but we do have a responsibility to carry the memory and to work towards making sure that we are living in a society, in a city, in a country that always acknowledges that and wants to do better. I'm going to introduce the other panelists that are coming on now. We've got some amazing people from some genuinely wonderful services. I've sent people to all of these services before, and I've always heard back saying that they were marvelous. They were so helpful. We're going to be clear that they cannot work miracles. There are some things that they can't do. What they can do, though, is give you the advice and the support that you need for you, for your situation, and tell you what is and isn't possible. And they will always be honest with you, which is just invaluable. So first up, we have Divya, who is the Capability Strengthening Lead at InTouch. It's a specialist family violence service supporting migrant and refugee communities affected by family violence. Hey, Divya. Lovely to have you here. We also have Gina, who is the Senior Manager, Support, Recovery Management and Practice Development at FREE, which is FVREE, Free from Violence. They are the primary provider of specialist family violence services in Eastern Melbourne, Naarm region. Hey, Gina.
Hi.
And we have Belinda, who is the Director of Legal Services and Principal Lawyer at the Eastern Community Legal Centre, which provides free legal advice and assistance for a range of matters for people in Melbourne's East. Hello, Belinda.
Hello, everyone.
So these are the amazing panelists that we're going to have talking about the help and support that is available for people affected by family violence and for people who are looking for advice to support a loved one. But before we get into that, I just want to do a very quick sort of scene setting, just because I know the last year, if all you're reading is the news, it feels like things are getting worse, like we're going backwards, like it's difficult to hold on to hope that there's just everything is getting negative and not positive. And I think it's worth reminding, I do it regularly, reminding ourselves, but also reminding each other of how far we've really come. And the thing that really brought that home to me in the last year or so was when I went to Rosie Batty's 10 years of her advocacy, 10 years since her son Luke was killed. She had an event. She had Fiona McCormack, who was, when Luke was killed, was the CEO of Domestic Violence Victoria. She was accompanied by Ken Lay, who was the police commissioner at the time, and Daniel Andrews, who was the opposition leader when Luke was killed. And they sat there and talked about what it was like that first day. And I remember watching that press conference with Rosie, and I was stunned. I was just almost rendered speechless, because she said in that moment, this is family violence and it can happen to anyone. And back then in 2015, it was 2013, I think, it was almost unheard of that somebody would call that family violence. It was just a good guy who snapped or a mentally ill guy who made a mistake. She called it family violence, and it was stunning. And now it's Well, of course it is. What else would you call it? And we forget how much has changed in those 10 years. And we forget about the effects of the Royal Commission. And I was one of the people 10 years ago who, I was a journalist then, and I was writing about, we don't need a Royal Commission. We don't need to spend all this money on a talk fest. We already know what needs to be done. And I was so wrong, because that Royal Commission brought together so many structures and created so many structures that now act to support each other. All these organizations here and their ability to share information, to share service, work together, all of that came out of the Royal Commission. The work was being done before the Royal Commission, but those structural changes that were desperately needed hadn't happened, and we didn't think would happen. Over those 10 years, we've understood the difference between family violence as just being something that's purely physical into a whole range and a pattern of behaviour. I remember reporting on family violence 10 years ago, and it was a single incident. It was a moment in time. It was, he did this to her this one time. Now, when we talk about family violence, we know it's a pattern. It's an entire way of behaving that's designed to humiliate and destabilize and dehumanize and control. And we're in the process of implementing legislation for that. 10 years ago, that was unthinkable. We'd never heard of the term coercive control. You go back 20, 30 years and they hadn't even used the term domestic violence. So things keep moving along. Our understanding of the men who use violence, primarily men, but not always, of why they do it, of the things that we can do to intervene and to prevent them, is certainly vastly expanded. The services that we offer, the structures through police and courts, which I'm certainly not going to sit here and tell you they're perfect by any means, they're not, but they have absolutely improved to what they were 10 years ago. When I can remember sitting in courts and listening to judges blaming women for wasting the court's time, and police turning up saying, Your Honour, I don't even know why I'm here. This is rubbish. That kind of thing just doesn't happen anymore. The sort of things that police would overtly say to victim survivors of, well, what did you think was going to happen? That kind of attitude. It's still there. It's more hidden, happens occasionally, but it's not structural the way it was 10 years ago. And the thing about change is that we never finish. I know everybody here on this panel is still working towards change. We can still see the things that need to be done. We can see the things that have been done. We know where they're working really well. We can see where maybe they're not working really well. One of the ways that is actually demonstrated by this panel, we know that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women are disproportionately represented in family violence. And this is not because Aboriginal culture is violent. It's because of the effects of colonisation. We know that actually the majority of Aboriginal women in Victoria who are affected by family violence, the men who are abusing them are not Aboriginal men. We know that this is going on, and we know that how often Aboriginal women's voices are not heard in discussions about family violence. And we are saying straight up, this is a panel without an Aboriginal woman on it. We understand that that is not ideal. One of the problems that we have, though, is the constantly demanding the time and energy and expertise of Aboriginal women and constant representation. And we don't always acknowledge how exhausting that is, that it's a constant putting people up to, in the gaze of racism, of colonialism and trauma. And that's not always easy to do or to ask of people. So in this case, where we don't have any Aboriginal women on the panel, we acknowledge it. We acknowledge that this is a lack of representation of the disproportionate people who are represented in family violence. And we also will talk about the services that all the people on the panel offer and the services that they work with that work directly with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women and families. That, again, also talking about change, that was not something we were talking about 10 years ago. 10 years ago, even only 10 years ago, Aboriginal women were still very much invisible. Migrant and refugee women were still very much invisible when we were talking about family violence, because we were still trying to get the conversation started. And I don't think, or I know that that is not because people at the time were overtly racist. It was because we were so far behind that we had to start somewhere. And now that we have got that discussion moving along, that we have got a much more nuanced understanding of family violence beyond the physical and the emotional and the sexual and financial and psychological, that all these things are tools to control and exert power over somebody, that we're now also understanding those deeper nuances of race, of class, of money, of visa status, of particularly women with disabilities, again, disproportionately overrepresented. Anybody who is vulnerable to a display of power, essentially, is likely to be disproportionately represented in family violence. We are much clearer on that now. The evidence is undeniable. We have that research because that work has been done over the last 10 years. And over the next 10 years, I think we're going to get even better information, even better, clear evidence of what we need to do and where we need to go. And the services that you're going to hear about tonight will definitely be part of that. So enough from me. I want to go to all our wonderful panelists and ask them just to describe the sort of services that you offer to the community and what people can expect when they come to you. Divya, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Jane, and hello everyone tuning in. So a little bit about InTouch. InTouch is a specialist family violence service. We provide person-centered, integrated, culturally responsive family violence services for migrant refugee families across Victoria. We've been around for about 40 years now, and we provide support in what we call an in-language, in-culture model. And what that means is when a woman is referred to our service, she's referred to a case manager who either speaks a language or is from a cultural background, if that's something that the woman consents to. And we work within a culturally tailored case management model. And we also have a wraparound service that addresses legal matters as well. We have an in-house legal center, as well as all the other services that is tailored to the needs of the woman in her help-seeking journey.
Thank you so much, Divya. Gina, over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Free is the specialist family violence service in the Eastern region, and we provide services or programs that include primary prevention and training. And that's actually, we do that nationally across Australia, which is really exciting. And then we also provide, the bulk of our work is case management based work. So again, we, like Divya, we provide really holistic case management. We provide that, we provide that in a culturally appropriate way, and we also take an intersectional lens over that. So we provide support to cisgendered women, trans women, other members of the LGBTIQ+ community. We also provide support to culturally and linguistically diverse women and women with disabilities. We do that by really partnering with the victim survivor and always aiming to keep children safe with that, with their non-offending parent. You'll also experience the work that we do is we always centre the perpetrator as the person who's using violence and responsible for violence. And we spend a lot of time in our case management service really making sure that we understand those patterns of behaviour and the impact that they're having on all victim survivors in a family. And I think that's about it in a nutshell.
Thanks, Gina. Belinda?
Hi, so I come from the Eastern Community Legal Centre. We like to describe ourselves as proudly multidisciplinary in a legal centre sense. So what that means is, yes, we have lawyers, and yes, those lawyers provide, legal advice in a range of matters that I'll no doubt discuss later today. But we also have a range of other professionals who can assist people with client care. So we have social workers, family violence advocates, elder abuse advocates, and financial counsellors who assist together hand in hand with our community lawyers to work with people who live, work or study in the Eastern Metropolitan region in relation to their legal issues. We also provide education and information sessions to our local communities, and we also, we're very proud of the way that we are informed by the needs of our local community, particularly as it relates to systems changes. So when Jane was speaking about the different systems changes that have happened over the years, we have worked very closely with our local community members to advocate for what our community believes the changes should be across those systems, particularly in relation to family violence and family law. And what you can expect, what I hope that you can expect when you come through Eastern Community Legal Centre's doors, is a client-centred and community-centred approach. That is that you don't necessarily need to come in knowing what your legal issue is. You can come in and say, I think that there's something wrong. I'm not quite sure what it is. And we have a specialised triage and assessment team who will talk with you to try and help you identify if you do have a legal issue and if the legal centre is able to help you with that in all the different ranges, in all the different ways that we do so.
Thanks, Belinda. All of you have talked about various aspects of serving particular cohorts in your community, of intersectional approach to the way that you deal with the people who come to you. Could you all just expand a little bit on that? So if somebody has, say, trouble with speaking English, or if they are from a particular faith background or a particular cultural background and they're not sure how to manage that, or if they've got, say, visa problems and they believe that there's no help available, what are the things that they could expect when they come to your services and that are specifically directed at them? Divya, do you want to start us off?
So when someone is referred to our service, as I mentioned earlier, we work within an in-language, in-culture model, and our team speaks over 20 to 25 different community languages. So many of them are from migrant or refugee backgrounds themselves, so they really have that first-hand understanding of the migration journey, of the cultural context. So there's opportunity for building trust and connection. A lot of women from migrant refugee backgrounds can feel really concerned about their visa status as well. And there's a lot of misinformation out there about visas as well. And so our case managers are able to work at the pace of the woman to provide that psychoeducation on her rights, her visa status, debunking some of the myths around visas as well. And obviously, if we need to work with an interpreter, we will work with an interpreter, but we'll ensure that the woman is feeling safe for us to also engage an interpreter. And there are lots of different ways that we are able to, again, tailor our response to the individual, depending on what their needs are. And also confidentiality is a big concern for a lot of women from migrant backgrounds as well. So obviously we would never share the information of the woman without her consent unless there's, serious risk for her or her children's safety. We're also very careful about how we contact clients as well. We ensure there's a safe time. We honor the safe time that is given to us. And especially if they're still living with or being monitored by the person who's using violence. So our case managers are able to, have that wraparound support to alleviate some of these stresses that a lot of women from migrant refugee backgrounds might have.
Thank you, Divya. And you also refer people and help them work with other services if they need a service that's not directly available through In Touch, is that right?
Absolutely, yep. We also work in a co-case management model. So this is where we work alongside another service so that there's, again, that holistic support to address all of the different needs. And every woman's experience is different. So where we can offer that support, we will. And if not, we'll obviously make recommendations for services. We can also write support letters where it's suitable. It really depends on a case-to-case basis. But we do our best to advocate for the client.
And you can help with those other services if language is a barrier.
Absolutely, yeah. We are available for also secondary consults, which is often what other services would use as well. So I can talk a little bit about that as well maybe later. But services can contact us if they're unsure about engaging a client from a particular community, or if there's questions about visas. So we are available to provide that additional advice for other services.
Great, thanks, Divya. Gina, could you also maybe talk to us a bit about the services that are available for children and young people?
Yeah, sure. So following on a little bit from what Divya talked about, and it's great to see her here and also Belinda, because we really value our community collaborations and our community partners. We really rely on them for support and to provide that co-case management and specialised support to our clients. I think right from the start at Free, we make sure that our workforce is really representative of the communities that we work in. So we have a really diverse workforce, and I think our staff speak around 18 different languages, so we can provide, where we can, provide case management support in language and culture if we can. Where we can't, we obviously refer out. We also got a really comprehensive induction and competency-based probation period where we're making sure that our staff are getting the training that they need to be able to provide really inclusive support. We think that that's really important. Always, no matter who we're working with, we always are centering the responsibility for violence back to the person using violence, and really naming and understanding those patterns of behaviour and the impacts it's having on family functioning and on victim survivors. We really network with local services and make sure that we've got really robust referral pathways, and that includes services for children in our area. We also are really lucky that we have 3 practice leads within our service. So we have an LGBTIQ+ practice lead, Rebecca, who does case consult with our own case managers and also will consult more broadly. She also does a lot of capacity building work within the region, which is fantastic. We also have the disability practice lead for Inner East. And again, that's a consultation and capacity building, which is fantastic. And then we also have a children and young persons practice lead. So George, who's our children and young person practice lead, has actually been really crucial in implementing our Safe and Together framework, which is a model of working with families and children who are experiencing family violence. And she does a lot of consultation for work where we can refer out, and also work that we can do within our own case management teams. What else do we do? Oh, we also have 2 specific COLD funded roles, which are funded through federal money. And although all of our case managers work with culturally and linguistically diverse clients, we have those 2, which is fantastic. And they also participate in a statewide community of practice, which again is really about upskilling and making sure they know what they need to know, and also that networking and meeting other people. And we also have Aboriginal Liaison Officer. We're incredibly lucky to have Jules, who's been working with us for a number of years, and she's very well respected throughout the region. And again, she does consultation both internally and externally, and works directly with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who access our service. And we also have a therapeutic program which has a children's stream. So we have a creative arts therapist, Justine, who works directly with children and also does a lot of dyadic work, so that work with children and their parents.
Wow, you're really covering all the bases there, aren't you, Tina?
Yep, I had a big list to get through.
Obviously, a big topic in people trying to escape a person using violence is people who are either homeless or at risk of homelessness. And I know this is one of the ones where we don't really have a solution, but you do provide some advice and some realistic idea of what to expect. Is that right?
That's correct. So we follow the federal government and state government's policy around safe at home. So wherever we can, we really work with women and, I should say victim survivors. We work with victim survivors to remain safely in their home. So we do that in a number of different ways. We have brokerage available for personal safety initiative response. So if people are needing kind of practical support to stay safe in the home, like changes of locks, what do you call them, security doors, window film, in some cases CCTV, we can provide those things as well. Sometimes people they're at a serious risk of violence and harm, so they need to come out of the home for a short period of time. So we have a crisis program, which is motel-based accommodation, where we provide short-term temporary accommodation, where we support and work with the victim survivor either to return home with safety measures put in place, because we know that that's much less disruptive to work and school. and just routine of life. Or we work with them to access alternative private rental. We work with homelessness services where there's maybe not that kind of option, or we encourage to stay with family and friends. So, yep.
Great, thanks, Gina. And Belinda, I know that all the community legal centres just do such sterling work with such tiny, tiny budgets. And every year I'm there at the federal budget going, give the legal services more money. But can you talk to us a bit about the amazing work that you do on criminally underfunded budgets with people from all different communities and all different needs? Because it's not where you can just go into one area of law and say, well, I do family law and that's all I do. You're practicing across a very, very wide range of disciplines.
Yeah, oh, thank you, Jane, and thank you for being an advocate as well for the sector. The types of, I guess, the types of legal issues that the Eastern Community Legal Centre does is actually informed by our community at any given time. So at the moment, a lot of the work that we have been, I'll just concentrate on the legal work first, then talk about the communities that we prioritise. So a lot of the work, the legal work that we have been focusing on for golly, the last 20, 25, 30 years, 70% of that work has been in relation to family violence, so well before the recent reforms in the last 10 years. And that's because we know that our community has informed us of what it is that they're experiencing. So that would include, in the legal realm, that would include, court orders such as, intervention orders. It would also include in family law. We have a lot of family law matters that come through that are experienced by our community members. We also can provide advice and occasional representation in what's called summary crime matters. So that's criminal matters that are not in the bigger courts or in the smaller courts and magistrates' courts. We also assist people in relation to infringements, so fines, but often those that are incurred as a result of their experience of family violence. So either other people have incurred fines in a survivor's name, and using a victim survivor's car and then causing fines to incur. And we also assist in relation to victims. We have a victims legal service. So that is somebody who has experienced an act of violence against them. We have specialised service that is able to assist them to apply for under state laws to be able to get some sort of financial compensation to help you recover from the act of violence that was perpetrated against them. But you are so right, Jane. In terms of the reach, we have a very big community. We're very lucky to work in such a giant community out here in the East. But we do have to sort of prioritise who it is that we can reach and who it is that we work with our partners, such as Free and In Touch and others, to help do referrals where we cannot assist either because of capacity or because actually we just don't have the expertise, because there are so many other legal issues that can result that we just don't have the expertise for, and it would not be good for anybody if we were to pick up those matters. Our priority communities are they're quite a long list. They're children and young people experiencing or at risk of experiencing family violence, our First Nations community, older people who are experiencing or at risk of experiencing elder abuse, our lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex and queer peoples, people who experience language or cultural barriers, and people experiencing or at risk of homelessness, and people with a disability or with a mental illness, and people impacted by climate change, which is certainly something that we have seen out in our outer eastern regions here more recently, but actually has always been experienced by our communities out in the eastern region.
Belinda, thank you. That's amazing. And can I just check? I know sometimes you're able to offer a free service, but
yes.
Is that right?
Yes. No. We will offer. Thank you for clarifying. We will offer free legal advice, and if we provide representation, it will always be free in relation to that client work.
Okay, but sometimes people might have to pay if they can. Is that how it works? but it would be explained beforehand. Like if somebody comes to you and says, I have this problem, if there is going to be any requirement that they'll need to pay for legal advice, that would be set up front, wouldn't it?
It would be set up front with other with other law firms, yes, but not with the Eastern Community Legal Centre. We are free in relation to client work, all free, yes.
Wow, that's amazing. Even more amazing. Just want to remind everybody watching in the webinar chat, there's a whole lot of services coming up. The amazing team from Knox and Monash Health are putting links to all this legal services, housing and homelessness supports, different cultural and community supports if you're looking for anywhere.
Wow.
All of those in the webinar chat. So can I just ask all of you too, I mean, it seems like such an obvious thing when you're doing this every day, but for somebody who's a bit nervous about approaching, there's just physically, how do they contact you? So is there, do they call? Can they come in? Is there online chat? Can they text? Can they email? Divya, could you start off and just give people a sense of what they can do?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously the contact information will be in the chat as well. But there are two ways as to how we often get our clients into our service. So it will be through the referral from the Orange Doors or any other professional services would make a referral for the women, for the victim survivor to access InTouch's support. And obviously we have an eligibility criteria. So often if a woman is referred to our service, it is someone who is requiring a culturally tailored case management and is needing that in-language, in-culture support, as I mentioned earlier. But we also have the option of self-referral. So, someone who's experiencing family violence and meets the eligibility criteria of our service can also self-refer. And all of that is either through the number, which is put in the chat as well, or the our website, which also has links for professional referrals, but also for self-referrals as well.
Okay. If anybody's trying to copy and paste from the chat, I think there's something that's saying that we can't do that. When we send out the email with a link to the video tomorrow, we'll have all the details of all the services and how to get in touch with them. So phone numbers, websites, everything will be sent through to everybody who registered for the seminar. So even if you're not watching it live, you should get that email with all those services. If not, just a simple Google of any of the three that you can see at the moment. So InTouch, free with the V, or Eastern Community Legal Services. And as you can tell, they all work very, very well together, and they will make sure that you get where you need to go.
Yes, I might also just read out the number for anyone who's just listening. It's 1-800-755-988. So that's 1-800-755-988 to contact our service.
Great, thank you so much, Divya. I know from the work that I've done that confidentiality is always something people are worried about, that even if they'll say, oh yes, but they say they keep it confidential, and then what happens if they get a subpoena, or what happens if somebody overhears, or what happens if can he trick them into giving the information? And it's a matter of really personal safety concern. And they're not always sure what people do to protect them and their information and their confidentiality. So Gina, could you maybe just run through quickly what Free does to make sure that people are safe when they come to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're really clear about that. We have a rights and responsibilities charter that we give to people so that they can read. There's also information on our website. We also explain that we provide what's called limited confidentiality. So we provide confidentiality of information on a secure website. I think it's, yes, website is our portal, our base where we put all of our information in. That's government provided, and that is very safe. And it's limited insofar as if people come and speak to us and they indicate that they want to harm themselves and or somebody else, then we actually are mandated to respond to that. So if, for example, if people are indicating that they want to harm their child or someone else is harming their child, we have to report that through to Child Protection. If people are indicating that they may want to harm themselves, then we have to report that through to either police and or psychiatric care. We also explained that we legally have to provide information to courts if we are subpoenaed. However, there are things that we can put in place if we don't feel that that's in somebody's best interest. So we can apply to the court to not provide that evidence, or to provide evidence only to the magistrate. And Belinda will be able to talk about that probably a little bit better than I can. But we explain all of those things so that people know when they come through to our service exactly what confidentiality means, what consent means, that they can withdraw their consent. So we try to be as clear as we can, and we go over it a number of times to make sure that people really understand that.
And if somebody wanted to get in touch with your service and just ask some questions or get some information, can they do that anonymously?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if people are worried about confidentiality, but they just want to understand, in this particular situation, here's my situation, what are my options?
Yep.
They can get some of that information.
That's exactly right. Yep. So they can do that, and we can work with other ways where people aren't keen to give names and things like that. So we can work through those on individual cases.
And am I right, Divya and Belinda, that both your services do the same? That as far as it's possible, that you can provide information anonymously. It's when you actually have to start getting into specifics of activities that you might need somebody's details. But just as far as, well, here's what you can do and here's what the options are, that can be given anonymously. Is that right?
Belinda, you go first.
Oh, sorry, Divya. So in relation to providing legal advice, we would be asking somebody, so there are two things here. One is in relation to confidentiality. When you're calling a legal service, it is the confidentiality standards are extremely high. So any sort of legal service or any lawyer is not permitted actually to release any of the information that you give to them, and they're because it is considered like extremely important that the client can trust the lawyer. So then the client can say everything that the lawyer asks, or answer all the questions that the lawyer is asking, so that the lawyer can represent them fully and fearlessly. And so because of that, if there is any threat to the confidentiality of that client who's revealed stuff to the lawyer, essentially, we will not reveal anything unless there's a court order that requires us to do so. And I can guarantee you, it's not just Eastern Community Legal Centre. I'm sure that Divya's lawyers do this as well. We will be dragged kicking and screaming to the court. And I have literally been in this position where I have resisted and resisted and resisted providing information that a client has said to me because of that very, very that very, very important relationship of client confidentiality. However, in terms of asking for information anonymously, there's a possibility of doing that, but we would frame it as a secondary consultation. So we would, so the way that we do that is if a worker calls us and we may not necessarily want to get all the full information of what that worker's client's information is, so that we can give general advice to the worker about the general legal sort of situation, and then we're not holding any information about that worker's client. So it's slightly different from freeze obligations in that way. Over to you, Divya.
Thanks, Belinda. No, I was just going to add as well that obviously our social workers are also bound by the Code of Ethics as outlined by the Australian Association of Social Workers. So obviously confidentiality is a big part of that. And Gina already touched on this. We wouldn't share, the victim survivor's information without her consent unless there's serious risk for their or a child's safety. The other thing I just wanted to touch on is that sometimes we see a lot of clients who are not on valid visas. And so the fear is that, will a family violence service like In Touch, are we, is it our duty to report that anywhere? And I just wanted to share that it's not. So as we're a specialist family violence service. We're here to support the woman manage her safety within her capacity, and whatever that looks like in her visa status. It's not part of our duty to report that to the department or anything like that. If anything, we advocate for the client who are on precarious visa conditions. And with regards to accessing information. We are a voluntary service, so obviously if the woman is self-referring, she'll have to make that call. We will do an assessment over the phone with her. But again, we're a voluntary service. If the woman decides she doesn't want to work with our service anymore, she can drop off. But then we will offer that 1-day support where at least a safety plan is put in place through that 1-day support that for them engaging our service.
Mm.
Okay, thank you all. I'm aware that, look, I could keep going for hours and we're rapidly running out of time. So I just want to jump to another topic that comes up a lot, which is what we call victim misidentification, where something happens and the police turn up or somebody calls the police and the person using violence, the perpetrator, says, no, I'm the victim, and turns the person they're abusing into the perpetrator. And often you get things like they get charged, they get taken to court, they get orders enacted against them. And these women are terrified and don't know what to do and feel like people now believe that they are the one committing the family violence. Maybe we'll start with you on this, Belinda. Can you give us some sense of what can be done in these cases with people involved?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a terrible situation when misidentification occurs. However, I do want to say at the outset that I'm so glad that now the whole concept of misidentification is something that is known. And, in the past, this was impossible to be able to name. Even the term misidentification was not known. So the police themselves know that misidentification is a scourge. They know that this occurs, and also the courts, the judicial system knows that it occurs, and the legal system knows it occurs, and so that's much better than what it used to be. In terms of when it does occur, there are a number of things that can be done from the legal point of view. And the first one that I would suggest is that that somebody actually goes to either the Eastern Community Legal Centre, the local legal centre, Victoria Legal Aid, a law firm, and get advice straight away in relation to the fact that there's been misidentification. Now, I would also suggest that the person also speak with our support, our wonderful or other organisations who are here today in the room as well, who can help advocate for them and can also help people go into a legal centre, because it's very understandable that people would not want to go and seek legal advice if they've never done so before. But what then can happen actually behind the scenes is, if you do have a lawyer who's able to, that you're able to see in this, is that they can actually negotiate with the police before the matter actually gets listed at court. So this is something that isn't necessarily that well known, but if it is, if there has been a charge, or if there's been an intervention order that's misidentified against somebody, it's best to try and get support services in as quickly as possible, so that background work can be done, so that either the intervention order or the charge is negotiated or dropped, or that at the first hearing date, whatever that hearing date is, whichever court, so if it's in criminal courts, or if it's in the intervention order in the family violence courts, is that then even there can be more negotiation that can happen with the police then. In the event that the misidentification continues through the courts, if you have a lawyer, the lawyer can actually bring it up with the magistrate, with the judge at the time, and actually paint the picture of what has caused this misidentification. And the good thing is, because we now have this context of there being much more understanding of misidentification, and much less sort of, with all due respect, much less blind following of what the police have said at the outset, and more accountability held for all of our systems, there is a much higher chance of misidentification being, being stopped before people, have to go through the legal system for far too long.
Yeah, because all those structures really do recognise it as a tool of abuse, not just...
Definitely.
And I totally agree with what Belinda said, and I think that that's fantastic. So thank you for such a great summary, Belinda. And also the TODs, Free have staff within the Orange Door. Sorry for using jargon. TOD just stands for the Orange Door. They've started to use the tool called the Predominant Aggressor Identification Tools, where they can use that to actually identify when they feel that someone's been misidentified. They can use that tool and also then share that tool with other services to support that naming of misidentification.
And just before we move on, I'm also just going to say that what Belinda said about getting it done as soon as possible, getting acted on as soon as possible is important. That doesn't mean that if it's been going on for a long time, it might go back years even, stretch back to the time before this was understood as part of the toolbox for abuse. That doesn't mean it's too late, and it doesn't mean that it can't be done. It's always worth going to your community legal service and talking to somebody about it. They will understand, they will have seen it before, and they will try to help.
Yeah, I might just add a little bit there as well, Jane, with regards to Miss ID. For a lot of women from migrant backgrounds as well, the language barrier is one of the big challenges when first responders are not using interpreters, or even worse, getting the person who's using violence to speak on behalf of the victim survivor. Or there's lack of cultural understanding or cultural safety in their engagement, and lack of trauma-informed response. So, misreading some of the cues or body language of the woman who's clearly in distress as the person who's experiencing the violence, and, misidentifying them as the predominant aggressor. And at In Touch, we see at least one out of 3 of our clients experience misidentification. So it is very common, and we do provide comprehensive support around that, whether it's attending court for intervention orders or family law matters, supporting with parenting proceedings or character assessments. So helping overturn some of that, which obviously is tricky, but we provide that comprehensive support, and advocating with police and hospitals, all of those as well. Yeah.
Yeah, look, it is tricky with police because they are of necessity often the first point of call, or even, neighbours will call, but they're not always trained to the level of, say, the services that you all provide, and can be sometimes part of the problem. They are, I believe, trying to improve those services, but it's a journey, and it's not always effective. And the fact that they're trying to improve doesn't help somebody who's been the victim of misidentification, or even worse, somebody who's in the position of being abused by a member of the legal system, whether it's police, court staff, judges, lawyers. It makes them terribly vulnerable to not being able to get help. Again, Belinda, Divya, Gina, all 3 of you, I'm sure, would have experience of this and know how difficult it is to respond to, but it is possible to get some response now, certainly more now than I think it was even only a couple of years ago. Is that true?
Yes.
Belinda?
From the police, do you mean?
Yeah. So
yes. Oh, yes, definitely. Oh, I think, look, I've seen such significant changes in a range of the systems over the last 25 years, but the police have, I've seen really significant changes in a range of, for the police across the whole of the state as well. And the accountability that is expected of our police force is probably one of the biggest systems changes that I've observed. Something that also has happened, which the other panelists today will be able to speak to more than me, is, we have family violence liaison officers in the police stations now. And in terms of the misidentification cases, often our community lawyers call the family violence liaison officers first to talk it through with them, because they are meant to be the specialised police officers who understand the most in relation to all the new knowledge related to what we understand of the perpetration of family violence. So, and we will always try to negotiate with the police first before we go through more formal avenues, because the main thing is that we want the cases to be dropped for our clients first before we start complaining about the police generally.
Yeah, and I would echo what Belinda's just said, and we also work really closely with the Family Violence Unit. Each policing division has a family violence unit within it, which is a specialised unit of detectives that just work in family violence, and we have great relationships with them, and we can always reach out to them too if we have any concerns around misidentification, or we're having difficulty maybe with uniform in other stations. And that was part of the Royal Commission, and they've been absolutely fantastic to work with, and we have really great outcomes working closely with them.
Mm.
Look, it's difficult because we know that the response from police, if they are on the front line, the response is sometimes really bad. And denying that or covering it up.
Oh no.
What I'm saying though is that it's not across the board bad, and there are ways that we can work around the terrible responses and take some action against it now, that's becoming those pathways through around people who are blocking, who are causing problems, who are the problem themselves. Ways that we can deal with that now are being built into those structures, and that's new.
Yes, yes, and always could be improved, but yeah, at least, you know, we have that compared to what has happened before.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that, you know, I can let you know that, you know, I've spoken with police in different stations who themselves have admitted that, you know, the areas in which they work are not even far from perfect. They can be really terrible in certain situations. So, yeah, it is understood across the state that there are some still terrible situations that are occurring, and abuse that is occurring within you know, the institution of the police force occasionally. But then there's also such improvements that, you know, people are trying really hard as well.
I might just build on that as well, Jane, if that's okay. Obviously, for a lot of our clients, you know, engaging with the police is quite unsafe as well. It feels quite unsafe. It's not the first point of contact for a lot of victim survivors, especially for those who've had previous harmful engagement with authorities or, you know, like a healthy mistrust towards services as well. And so, yeah, acknowledging there's a clear power imbalance there when engaging some of these service providers, and often even family violence service providers are seen as authorities as well, which is, you know, very fair. And something that InTouch does as well is provide training for a lot of service providers, including first responders, on how to respond in a culturally safe manner, because obviously there's so much work that needs to be done, and there's so much to learn and unlearn from what we're seeing. And so one of the services that we are also advocating to provide some training for is with VicPol as well, on how to respond in a culturally safe manner.
Yeah, and obviously all of that work, like I said at the beginning, it's come some way. There's still a ways to go. None of us are given up yet, though. The other thing too to remember, if you or anyone you know does need some help and feels like police are either not safe or not helpful, that these services here and other services in the community are other ways that you can reach out for support and help that's not necessarily going through the police, that they don't have that same authoritarian response, and that they are much more community driven and much more experienced in dealing with the sort of complex support that people need, and not necessarily looking at a let's arrest our way out of this problem kind of response. So I think we might move on from that topic. I just wanted the last couple of minutes that we've got for this before we might ask if there's any more questions coming in. One of the things that we are trying to do better now, or trying to do now, is services for perpetrators and people who are using violence, who say they want to stop. Now, I just want to be clear that the fact that somebody says they want to stop doesn't necessarily mean they actually want to stop or that they will. But if somebody genuinely says they want to stop, the family genuinely wants to stay together, they believe that it's safe to do, but he needs support to learn a different way of being with his family and managing his fear and anger and all the other emotions that can exacerbate and drive family violence, what services are available to refer him to? Divya?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. So InTouch does provide services for men who use violence, specifically through our program called Motivation for Change. So you can also Google this, it will show up on our website as well. The program is culturally tailored and is delivered in a trauma-informed manner, and is designed for men from migrant and refugee backgrounds. So it recognizes that a lot of men from migrant refugee backgrounds experience unique settlement challenges, cultural pressures, but that also that violence is never acceptable. And so the focus is on helping men understand the impacts of their actions, take responsibility, learn safer and more respectful ways to be in relationships. And what makes our program unique as well is that it's delivered by facilitators who understand the cultural context, who are from the community themselves, and obviously speak the language. So we run at the moment 2 main cohorts, a South Asian group and an Afghan men's group. And it's delivered in language where it's suitable, and all of the facilitators share that lived migration experience and are able to relate with the participants. So really bringing it back to, the accountability of the person who's using violence. And obviously what remains central through the design and delivery of that program is that the well-being of children and women remains top priority, and our work with perpetrators don't replace the work that it's not, it complements it. It aims to build and reduce harm for women and children.
Thank you, Divya. Gina, do you want to talk a bit about services for perpetrators?
Yep, free in and of itself doesn't provide services to perpetrators, so we will refer out, especially for young people. So where young people are identified as using violence in the home, we'll refer out to Meridian program. We also may do some case management internally, because often young people are also have an experience of family violence and are victim survivors in their own right. So we may work with them as victim survivors in their own right. Our staff in the Orange Doors, that's a collaborative model. So our staff within the Orange Doors have access to a wide range of services, including men's services. So through the Orange Door, people using violence, if they want that referral, can go through those services.
And there's obviously No to Violence, which offers a lot of services for men, and that will be in the list of support services that we'll be sending out tomorrow. All right, so the other thing that I wanted to cover before we go to questions, so people in the audience, if you have a question that you want to ask, start thinking about it and pop it in the Q&A chat. We just go through this last one, which is the steps to recovery. Somebody who had spent a long time recovering from family violence told me that she thought of it the way she thought of her recovery from cancer, and the way the medical system dealt with that it was always relevant to her healthcare records, not necessarily relevant to every health issue that she had or every doctor's visit, but always there in the background as something to be aware of. And that sort of regular checkups, regular awareness that the cancer was there, that it's in remission, it's gone, but the effects never really leave. Or if they eventually, she gets said, I got to the point where the cancer was absolutely gone. I was completely free of it, and I was completely free of the trauma of family violence. But that was unpredictable, took a long time, and had moments of coming back and forward that nobody expected. And that, I think, is fairly typical of the recovery and healing that most people go through from all kinds of different forms of trauma. Very few people can do this on their own. Some people can, but usually we need some help somewhere along the way. Sometimes that can come from friends and family, but often we need other kinds of help from a range of different services. So Gina, could you maybe start us off with talking about some of the services that are available to help people and their families recover?
Yeah, sure. So we provide a small therapeutic team within our service, which is for children and also adults that are recovering from family violence. And there's a plethora of, I suppose, other services within the Eastern region who also provide counselling. There's Each Counselling, they do family violence counselling, and other services that also do that. There are also private practitioners, but I would say reaching out to private practitioners, it's really important to make sure that you ask them about what their values are around family violence, to make sure they align with your own, how they might work with that. But I think I think the biggest thing is to talk to the victim survivor, ask them what they need, what are their steps that they think to recovery, because everyone's really different. Therapy suits some people, it doesn't suit others. Some really enjoy talk therapy, other people like art therapy, some people like equine therapy and animal therapy. Other people find their own therapy through yoga, through being out in nature. So I think that that's really important, to really understand what that person wants and to give them time. Sometimes people just want space after, you know, after everything's happened and they've made a move, or they haven't, whatever they happen to do is okay. And they need compassion, and they need your belief, and they need time to build trust back in themselves and to build that sense of agency. And I agree with what the person that Jane said. It's always there. And some people can live okay with that, other people can't. So to be really guided by that victim survivor, I say, is the most important thing.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we all need to remember, and I say this to people just watching the webinar as it's rolling out, that self-care is not fun or easy. Self-care is hard.
No.
Self-care is not bubble baths and chocolate cake. I wish it was that easy and that, but self-care is doing things like getting up and going for a walk every morning, or going to the gym, or going to therapy, even when you don't want to. It is talking to people and walking away from difficult relationships because you know they're bad for you, and that can be in friendships, in romantic relationships, or in family relationships. These things are not easy, and they do take time, and they do require support, and that is all self-care. I think of going to the gym 3 times a week and making myself eat vegetables and go to bed early instead of lying on the couch with chocolate biscuits watching TV until 4 in the morning, which is what I want to do. Going to bed early, having the vegetables, getting decent sleep so I can get through the next day and stay on top of things is a form of self-care. It's not actually self-indulgent, it's often self-discipline, and it's not easy, and we do sometimes need support for that. Divya, do you want to talk about some of the supports that are available for recovery?
Yeah, absolutely. As Gina mentioned earlier, recovery is a deeply personal journey, and obviously the support that is needed differs from one individual to the other. What we found from clients from migrant refugee backgrounds is that recovery requires a culturally sensitive and holistic approach. And obviously we embed that even from the moment of case management as well. So the elements of recovery that is being built up towards through case management as well. For instance, honoring her cultural practices, for example. For a lot of women, separation doesn't necessarily just involve a civil procedure. There's a lot of cultural or faith, based procedures as well that is needed, and that she needs support with for her to journey in that holistic recovery post case management. So we do embed it in that journey, and a lot of key areas that we find is crucial is obviously safety and legal protection. So navigating the Australian systems, putting things in place for her, for the victim survivor to feel some kind of security in their immigration status, because that often is a big part. Some people might say it's just a visa, but for a lot of women, the visa is directly connected to their safety. And sometimes is the main concern as well, because again, there is a lot of misinformation out there. So a key part is that legal protection or stability in their immigration status. We also have the Inspire program at InTouch. So anyone who's exited case management at InTouch is referred into the Inspire program that has events, programs, groups that focuses on empowering women to regain control over their lives again, and offers tailored support for emotional well-being, resilience, economic empowerment, whether it's job readiness, because again, financial independence is a big part of recovery. And so enabling or putting things in place to support women to enter the workforce, if that's something that they like, is a big part of recovery, is what we find with our clients.
That's so good. Thank you so much for explaining all of that. We did have a really good question come in before the webinar that I think really goes to the heart of what the fears that a lot of people have of coming to services, which is, do you support people? Do you understand the feelings of guilt at leaving? That there's this expectation of, because he's abusive, you should be glad to leave, but often people aren't. They don't want to leave. They want him to stop. They don't want to leave. And if they do leave, they feel terribly guilty, particularly if there's children involved and the family unit's breaking up. Do the support services understand that? or I know they do, but can you explain, maybe if we start, Belinda, with you and then go across the rest of the panel, explain how you understand that, how you incorporate that into your work?
Yeah, absolutely. We, the community lawyers have regular, they have regular training in relation to family violence, in relation to understanding the dynamics that evolve in relationships where there is violence, and as a result, you do understand that the experience of experiencing family violence does not mean, therefore, that you just want to escape or you should escape at all. Like, we see on a regular basis, particularly in our family violence cases, that we will have particularly a woman come in and seek advice at the beginning, and then we may not see them for quite some time, and then they will come back, and it's often what happens is because they have decided not to leave the relationship, which is totally up, up to her, of course. And it's our job to provide her with the legal options, and to, if she wishes, for us to then help her exercise those options when she's ready to do so. And we know very well that the only way that we can ensure that we can assist somebody who's experiencing family violence is to meet her where she is at. Otherwise, all we're doing is lecturing, we're being moralizing, and that is really not what we want to be. We try to be as client-centered as we can. We always are learning. We get training from InTouch, we get training from Free as well, in relation to, working more and more in a more client-centered way. So from a legal centre's point of view, that's what we try very hard to do.
Thank you so much, Belinda. Gina, is there anything you'd like to say about understanding those really complex feelings that come with this situation?
Yeah, absolutely. I think women experience a lot of grief and loss when it comes to the thoughts of leaving a relationship, ending a relationship, and that can't be underestimated. They often love that person. They were really attracted to that person. They've had good times with that person, and that's what they want again. So we really respect that and honour that, and like Belinda, we work with the person where they're at. And we don't force anything, we give options, and we do a lot of psychoeducation work around really understanding what's going on for them and what they're feeling. We also try and reframe some of the stuff around family, that families look really different, and that sometimes, you have to take some of the family away, or one of the family members has to leave to keep that family safe. So just because you may, if someone chooses to leave, it doesn't necessarily mean you've disbanded the family. You've just taken a part of the family to keep that part of the family safe, or someone's had to move away to keep the family safe. So we really like to reframe some of that kind of language around disbanding families or breaking up families, because violence does that in and of itself. So yeah.
What Divya was saying about recovery is often about redefining your family and understanding it is absolutely still whole. In fact, it's even more whole.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I might also add that for a lot of clients from migrant refugee backgrounds, the guilt also is with letting the community down, or fear of letting the family down, because often there are lots of expectations of migrating to a new country, and so for a lot of people who come from collectivist cultures, that can be a real challenge. And so obviously our case managers really do have that first-hand understanding of the cultural context and are able to provide that psychoeducation for the woman. And our goal is to always make sure that the woman feels safe and heard and supported, and is able to make informed decisions about their life, and obviously without any pressure or judgment. We are a voluntary service as well.
Thanks, Divya. There's just a couple of questions coming in about access. Now, I know that we did talk a little bit about how people can get in touch either online or by phone or through the Orange Doors. But for people who are not sure about which local service they go to, if they go to the Orange Door, or Divya, if they call InTouch but they're not in the right area or they're not in the right place, all the services, as I understand it in Victoria, all know where the relevant patches are and can redirect you. Is that right?
So with InTouch's service, we are a statewide service. So any referrals that we get from any service, whether it's regional, rural settings, we are predominantly over the phone, unless we're doing any court representation or anything like that. But yeah, we're a statewide service. So anyone who resides in Victoria and is experiencing the impacts of family violence, if they meet the other eligibility criteria, should be able to access our service.
So they can do things like even go to their GP or their pharmacist and say, I need to talk to InTouch, can I use your phone, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and ideally a lot of these services should know where to direct a lot of people who do access. Yes, GPs are often the first point as well, but if not, they would go to the Orange Door, and the Orange Door would make a referral if it's appropriate for us anyway. So yeah.
And the same with you, Belinda, if somebody contacts the Eastern Legal Service, but they're not in your area, you will send them to the right place, make sure that they get in touch with the right person.
Yeah.
No, we don't help you. You're in the wrong place. Bye now.
No, definitely. And we will also try very hard to do, what's called a warm referral. So we will try very hard to call up that legal centre and explain the situation for them, especially when we have situations where, people are, it's already been such a big deal for them to call us in the first place.
Yeah. And Gina, the same with you. Is there out of area or in area that people can call?
Yeah. The TODs for us, the Orange Doors, are our central intake point. So most people come through the Orange Doors, but they can also contact directly, and then we can work out where's the best spot for them to go. But the Orange Doors in any area will absolutely be able to direct them to the correct service. And sometimes they can do the work right then and there, and they're really good at that initial assessment and planning work of what might need to happen. So yeah, they're a really great place to start.
Yeah. Okay. One of the aspects that, talking about the complexity of family violence and the way that it is the tools that perpetrators use, we know that money, financial independence, financial safety is a huge means of control, because if you're not financially independent, it's almost impossible for you to leave. It's very, very difficult to regain control over your life if you can't regain control over your finances. And in a separation that involves both divorce and family violence, and potentially also visa issues as well, those things can get incredibly complex. Belinda, did the community legal services have the capacity to help with organising financial side of a separation and the divorce as well?
So the Eastern Community Legal Centre can provide advice in relation to sort of financial rights, but we would not be able to provide representation or negotiation in it. But what we can do is get in touch with the right people who can do that. So they are either we have Women's Legal Service, who have the ability to run financial property cases in small property matters. We can also speak with a select group of private lawyers who would be willing to assist somebody to provide legal advice and representation without necessarily being paid until the property has been sold, as part of the actual sort of negotiations. And we can also, there are also Victoria Legal Aid can also assist in some of these cases as well. What I would really, really try and impress upon everybody is please, it is disheartening to, that there's not many free services that can provide this assistance straight away. But what we can do is help you locate the people who can help you in relation to property division. And but we can assist with divorces, but divorces by themselves.
Okay, thanks, Belinda. Divya, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. So we do have the InTouch Women's Legal Service, who supports with matters at the intersection of family law, migration law, and family violence. So depending on whether they meet again, the eligibility requirements, it's a case-to-case basis, and obviously it depends on the complex needs of the client as well. Our team is able to support with family law litigation, family dispute resolution, and property settlement as well. With regards to the divorce, we do run divorce clinics for clients that are case managed by InTouch. And in these clinics, we sit one-to-one with the client and assist them in completing and lodging the divorce application. And we also have a checklist on our website. But again, this is for clients who are case managed at InTouch. And obviously, there's the 12 months after. So this would be ex-InTouch clients essentially. And there is a really long waiting list because we see around 8 clients per clinic in assisting them to apply for the divorce as well. So there is a long waiting list, but that is something that we do assist with.
Great, thanks, Divya. So just 2 last quick questions in the last 5 minutes. Belinda, could you just clarify that it's not just a requirement that there has to be physical violence to get intervention orders or start legal processes or even get police involved? Is that right?
Yes, that's right. It's very common for people to hear that it's only physical violence that the police will intervene in, or it's only physical violence that the courts will pay attention to. That is not true. But if you do hear that from the police, I would really highly recommend that you actually make a complaint about that to the police and go to and either seek the assistance of the family violence liaison officer within that police station, come to one of our services to get support to advocate for your rights in relation to that. But there's physical violence is now understood to be one of the forms of family violence, but so many other forms are there. And the Eastern Community Legal Centre has a number of cases where the police have assisted in intervention orders where it's been psychological violence. That's been very, very clear, and they've understood that. So sometimes when people hear that the police will only intervene in physical violence, it's because they've unfortunately had a very bad experience at the first outset with that service provider.
Thanks, Belinda. And I guess it just comes back to a reminder again that there are so many specifics and unique points to everybody's particular story. We haven't even touched on neurodiverse people or people with disabilities, that there are very, very specific needs that are individual. And we obviously can't answer questions to that level of specificness in this forum, but all of the services here, that if you get in touch, they can. If they can't do it themselves, they can find somewhere that can help for those very, very particular requirements and let you know what is available. And I am constantly amazed by the things that, I keep thinking I know all the services, and then somebody tells me, hey, did you know about this one? Because all the services are constantly looking at ways to improve, at better information they can provide to people, different ways they can provide that information. It's almost impossible to stay on top of it, but the services are really, really good at talking to each other and sharing that information, and then sharing that with the people who come to them. So the only other thing I think that I would just like to make sure we get really clear in the last 2 minutes, we've got 2 minutes. Often people will wonder who they can contact if they're worried about a friend, a family member, someone they care about, and they think, oh, but I can't call the service because I'm not them, they're not going to help me. Could you all just very quickly talk about what somebody can do if they're worried about a loved one, they don't know what to do, they don't know how to approach them or what to say, and they're looking for some help with that? Divya, could you kick us off?
This is a tricky one because, again, we are a voluntary service. We do obviously require that if it's a self-referral, that we're speaking to the woman directly or the person experiencing violence, obviously, because that assessment of risk needs to be done as well, and that psychoeducation that needs to happen. So this is where this is a bit tricky because we either accept referrals from a professional service or a self-referral. In a lot of cases, we do get calls from workers who are from community services as well. So this is where secondary consults are really helpful. If you're working for example, in a small grassroots organization or an ethno-specific organization or a faith-based community, that's when our secondary consults can be quite helpful, just to contact us and get to know what the eligibility criteria is, what are some of the important information for you to know, that probably could be helpful in the conversation that you might have with this person.
Thank you. And Gina, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, family members are welcome to ring us for secondary consults if they just want to talk about how they can support a person. That's absolutely fine. You can also go to the Safe and Equal website. They have information there on how loved ones can and friends can respond also if they're concerned about a family or friend.
Great. Thank you, Gina. We're almost at time. I just want to say to everybody, a lot of the time when we've all been talking, we've been talking about women as the people who are being abused and men as the people who are doing the abuse. That just reflects the reality of family violence, which is very, very gendered. But that doesn't mean that that is the only way that family violence happens. And it's not always necessarily between intimate partners. Family violence can happen within any family relationships or kinship relationships. It's often about an imbalance of power, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a male partner and a female partner. If you are feeling that you're not safe, that you're threatened, that you're scared, that you're feeling unable to control your own life because somebody in your family is making you feel that way, you can reach out to those services and they will talk to you, they will help you. If they can't help you specifically, if they know of a better service that is likely to give you better support because of your gender, because of your circumstances, they will know where to send you and they will help. On that note, we are just at the end of time. I want to thank, first of all the wonderful people on our panel. You have been absolutely amazing, such a source of knowledge and compassion. Thank you all so much for being part of it. Thank you all to all the people who turned up in the webinar and submitted such wonderful questions. I hope we were able to answer them to some degree, but again, I cannot encourage you enough. If you have more information that you want, get in touch with these services. As I think you can tell from tonight, they are here to work with the community and they're definitely very dedicated to the services they provide. Thank you on my behalf to Knox City Council and to Monash Health for setting up this webinar. As I said at the beginning, I firmly believe that community grassroots organisations and solutions are the most effective way that we can address the scourge of family violence, and I really feel very privileged to be a part of it. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy your night. I'm just going to remind you again, you will get the email with all the services, and I believe Dana is going to talk about a possibility for evaluating the...
Yep. Thanks, Jane. Thank you very much. And thank you. I will echo your sentiments to our amazing panel. Thank you so much for your time. And to you, Jane, of course, for moderating that conversation so eloquently. Your passion is obvious. Your advocacy is just what Victoria and Australia needs in this space. So thank you for being a part of tonight. I hope it's not the last time we work together. Thanks, everyone. My colleague has popped a evaluation in the chat. So look, we would be really grateful if you could complete this short survey. It really helps us to advocate for funding and resources so that we can do more work in this space. So it also helps us identify the topics that you, our community, would like to hear. Actually, this one tonight was being put on from the evaluation from our last webinar last year. So it does also sound like there were some challenges with some of the links. I think Jane advised that we will be sending out some of those services tomorrow. So check your inboxes tomorrow. I'll be sending that. The other option is you could always jump on the Knox Council website. It's knox.vic.gov.au/family violence supports, or just our website and then type in family violence support in the search function. Again, thank you to our amazing panelists, Divya, Belinda, and Gina. Thank you so much for your time. Also to my colleagues who you can't see on screen but have worked tirelessly to put this event together, Yelena and George from Monash, thank you. Kath from Maroondah and Felicity, my colleague who's sitting on the desk opposite me here at Knox. Behind the scenes, scenes in the lead up to tonight, and obviously moderating the chat and everything this evening. It does bring us to the end of our webinar tonight. So again, thanks to our panelists. Please click on the link. Hopefully that works for the evaluation. And thanks to all of our partners this evening, and to the Victorian Government as well, supporting through the Free From Violence local government program. Continue your advocacy, Jane. Continue the great work you're doing, you three in the community. And thank you very much again for your time. Enjoy your evening, everyone. Good night.
Right, thanks, Dana.